5, 4, 3, 2, 1. KenCast.
Hey everyone, welcome to Saturday. It's another KenCast. Thanks for joining us today, whether you're joining us live or on the replay. We love to have you here. And today we have a great episode for you. We're going to be talking about whether Karate Kid, the original movie, is a classic or not. I know a lot of us who are fans kind of assume it's a classic, but there are a lot of critics out there that don't think it's a classic. So today, we're going to dive deep into this, and we want to get your thoughts in the chat. Of course, if you've been watching my videos, if you've been watching KenCast and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit subscribe. We're going to try to hit 25,000 subscribers. That'll be kind of our next goal. We'd love to have you on board for that. But getting back to our discussion today, the only way we can have a great movie discussion is with a true movie expert, a true expert of 80s movies and cinema. And luckily today we have one with us, and you'll know him. He's been a frequent guest on KenCast. He is an amazing talent. It is Drew Rohaly. Drew, great to see you.
You're too kind, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me back. Thank you to all the awesome comments in the chat and your amazing audience. It's an honor to be on the KenCast once again. I love these Saturdays. It's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Drew. And as everyone probably knows, but if you don't know, Drew is co-host of the Last Row podcast. And you guys examine movies, what is it, like the movies you forgot you loved, right?
Yeah, and some others. When we want to do a new one, we'll do a new one, but we have a lot of what we might call classics and cult classics that we discuss on our show.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so classics and cult classics, we're going to be getting into that today. But you would say like your podcast kind of gravitates towards this time. Like you've done a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s. You're very familiar with all the movies that came out during this time. And really a lot of us fans think of the Karate Kid as a cult classic. I'm sorry, a classic. What offhand, just like, would you, from your own instinct, call Karate Kid a classic?
I would 1,000 million billion% call it a classic. It's permeated pop culture for many years since the year it came out. It has a lot of success behind it, and it's just an amazing movie. And I think it's like we said, permeated the culture and spawned so many other things within pop culture, within other movies, and just really it's become such an important movie, I think, in cinematic history back starting in the 80s. So I definitely agree. I would call it a classic without a doubt.
Right. And that's what I would think too. But I started to read articles where critics didn't agree with that at all. And so that's why I thought we should really kind of have this discussion, and we can settle it today forever for human history, whether Karate Kid is a classic, and we're going to try to do it objectively. Hey guys, love to see you in the chat. Look at that. NASA says Drew.
Hey,
yep, it's
NASA.
Drew. Philomena, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Philomena. Daniel, in my opinion, the whole movie franchise are classics.
Agreed.
That's interesting too, because we can talk about the sequels too, right, Drew?
Yeah.
And like, are they classics or are they not? Let's see. Aaron, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Aaron. Hello, Ken, pleasure to be here. Karate Kid for me is at least no doubt a classic. And hello, Drew.
Hey.
So, and do you guys like jelly-filled donuts?
I do.
Yeah, I prefer lemon-filled donuts, to be honest.
Like them. I like a good eclair too.
Yeah, exactly. And Adam's like, bro, why are we talking about donuts? Agree. Adam, well, the first Karate Kid movie is iconic, so yes, it's a classic. Okay. Well, we're going to be getting into this, guys. And along the way, we want your comments. We want to hear what you have to say in the chat. And we'll all come to a determination for the internet forever, whether Karate Kid is a classic. So as we always do, let's start with news.
KenCast News.
All right, guys. All right. Welcome. Get ready for news. We've got, as I've mentioned a few previous times, the Enter the Dojo concert. If you're in the LA area, this is with Leo Bierenberg and Zach Robinson and their band, and Vince DiCola, composer for Rocky IV, will be there in attendance. If you're in the LA area, get tickets. It's going to be an amazing time, and I will be there. So I might get to meet you if you come. If you haven't seen it yet, part 2 of the interview with William Christopher Ford is out. This was just a really inspirational set of interviews for me. There are 2 parts. A lot of people saw the first part, and the second part is out now, and I'd recommend checking it out. He talks about his background in martial arts, how he loved movies, how he saw the first Karate Kid in theaters. He has advice on bullying. He has advice on finding your own karate dojo. And so I really want to share this with you guys, and check this out. If you haven't come across Sensei Ford, he played Dennis in Karate Kid 3. He's really an inspirational person. And Drew, I know that you've listened to him, and
Yeah.
did you know him much apart from Dennis in Karate Kid 3?
No, and it's funny because I know when you and I were connecting, prior to this, I was so blown away by how humble, how just amazing of a person Sensei Ford seems, and he came across as such an amazing storyteller. The way that he explained some of the history of the movie in your first part, some of the other stories that he told in your second part, he comes across as such a nice, just kind person, and it permeates through the video screen when I'm watching this thing. And if you haven't watched these interviews, I definitely recommend it. And if Sensei Ford just happens to see this, like, thanks for being so open about some of the history you gave about the movie. It really opened my eyes to things that I had been wondering about Karate Kid 3 and filming of the movie, and some of the other, the inspirational stories like Ken mentioned for part 2. But yeah, I think it's a must watch for everyone that's watched your videos and the KenCast here. Go check it out, like, right away.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. And Sensei Ford, yeah, if you're watching, thank you so much. It was just really great to be able to speak with you. And everyone, the link is in the description. It should be in the description. If not, I'll put it in right after this. So definitely check that out. Now, last week we had Stripe the Warrior
awesome.
on, and we talked about a lot of things, but he's a cosplayer, and he is at the Fan Expo in Dallas right now, today. These are some pictures from today. Okay, he is Chosen. He's cosplaying as Chosen, and his girlfriend is Kumiko, and his friend is Daniel. And they're taking these pictures, and he was talking about it last week, so I thought I'd share with you what's going on today. They're fighting. Yep. And here's the live or die moment. So
that's a good outfit too. That's really nice job by Stripe there, and that's awesome. I love the outfit.
yeah, he's apparently very well known in the cosplayer community. I guess he hit it big with the Green Power Ranger. He cosplayed as the Green Power Ranger. So.
I have a huge soft spot for the Green Power Ranger, so that's awesome. I love that. Jason David Frank, that's awesome.
That's great. Yes. So have fun. If you're in Dallas or you're going to that, look for Chosen today, and you will meet Strife the Warrior. Okay, and guys, I just want to let you know I am working on a new video. This might be my biggest, longest analysis video I've done yet. It's going to be about Star Wars and Cobra Kai. Some of you might be able to guess what it's about, but keep an eye out for this. I think you'll get a kick out of it. And hopefully hopefully I'll be thinking about things that haven't been thought about before yet regarding these 2 franchises. So Drew, you're a Star Wars fan, right?
I am, and I'm so excited to see this video. I know you mentioned it before, but I can't wait. Like, I'm gonna hit the set reminder bell for this one specifically because I'm really excited to see what you do with this. I think it's a really cool concept.
Yeah, it's fun. It's going to take some work, guys, so hang in there, but it's coming. It's definitely coming, that's for sure. Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. And of course, Drew, you're coming to us from the Last Row podcast. And so what I would like to do is tell everyone about your latest episode. So what have you guys been working on lately?
So we've been doing a lot of we try not to do too many of the same movies in the same genre right away, but what we did last week is a classic thriller from the year 2000. So Ken mentioned we do a lot of movies you kind of forgot you loved, but there's a movie called Final Destination, if you're familiar with it, which we had a lot of fun with. And Badway had a revelation in this movie. You'll check it out in the description. But we talked a lot about death and the way that death reacts in this movie and whatnot. And we had a lot of fun with this one. So if you're a fan of Final Destination, or even if you're not, you don't really need to see the movie. We try to break it down in a fun way. We try not to do like a plot by plot recap. It's more talking about the different scenarios in the movie and just kind of having fun with them and thinking beyond the screen, so to speak. So if you're enjoying those kind of movies, check it out. We also did Johnny Mnemonic recently too. If you're into the cyberpunk genre, we've done a bunch of those types of movies. So we tend to do a lot of 90s, 80s action drama type stuff. But definitely check out the show if you get a chance, thelastwordpodcast.com, and let us know what you think of the show. Definitely appreciate any feedback that you guys have. And thanks to everyone from your audience, Ken, that's already checked us out and been participating in emails, chats, tweets. Thank you so much to everyone that's engaging with us. We love getting new listeners and engaging with you all. So thank you.
Well, absolutely, Drew. And just to let everyone know who's watching this that is not listening to your podcast yet, everyone who's been following this channel, who's gone over to listen to the Last Word podcast, has gotten hooked. And I've been hooked for years now. So I am excited. You guys are all about Terry Silver and Cobra Kai, but you take a much broader view and you look at movies just from the last few decades. So everyone check it out. Lastwordpodcast.com. There are also links in the description where you can go to whatever platform you listen to podcasts on.
Thank you.
So, oh, absolutely. And Drew, I think it's about time for us to launch into our main discussion.
KenCast discussion.
All right.
So official.
Very official. This is the big time. All right, everyone. We're going to be talking about The Karate Kid now. This is why we're here today. We're here today because not everyone seems to think it's a classic. I know obviously all of us have run into people who don't like the movie, but some critics are saying it's not a classic. So we're going to try to talk about this and like what makes a classic, what makes a cult classic. And is Karate Kid, the original one, either of those, separate from the fact that we're fans, for the broader culture, is it considered a movie classic? And Drew, you just to set us up before, just from your instinct, you would say yes, right?
100%, 100%. It's just, you can just feel it. It feels like a classic, and we have data that we'll back it up with, but I feel like it definitely is.
Yes, absolutely. And guys, let us know in the comments if you have any thoughts as we're talking about this. Aaron says, I love Final Destination. That's on the Last Row podcast. And Ken, when you say long, like Cobra Cole or like the Bigfoot video, or longer than both? Okay, Cobra Cole, you guys, if you're Cobra Kai fans, check out Cobra Cole. That is Do I Work for Terry Silver? And you see David Shatrad's in it with me. He plays Tom Cole on Cobra Kai. Get that? Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's longer. It's going to be a lot longer than Cobra Cole, or like the Bigfoot video. That's another short film, Bigfoot and Me, that just released. Definitely check that out if you're interested in Bigfoot, but it's going to be way longer than the Bigfoot short film. So this will be like an analysis video for the Star Wars thing. And so I like to do that sometimes. And we're doing that today. We're analyzing movies. Before we start, Philomena says, Karate Kid got me through my school years. When I was bullied as a kid, seeing a kid like me go through the same thing as I did gave me solace. And that's true, right? I mean, that's part of the impact of the movie.
And I think that this movie's had that type of impact on a lot of folks. And I think, you could argue that that's part of what makes it a classic, because it helped people through difficult times. And, it's still, I think, doing that. And, well, I won't get into it yet too early.
Right, exactly. And, NASA says, what do critics know anyway? It's funny you bring that up. Drew, shall we launch in and see what some critics have said about The Karate Kid? Okay.
I think we should.
All right. So, guys, I don't know if you can read it. I'll read this part out loud. This is a review of the remake Karate Kid in Vanity Fair. Okay. The critic says, the original Karate Kid has had a cultural resurgence over the last 10 years. Call it the Bill Simmons effect. Simmons, one of the most deservedly popular and influential online sports writers in the history of the internet, absolutely worships the Karate Kid. And they go on about that. And then they say, almost single-handedly, Simmons has transformed an entire generation's opinion of the Karate Kid. From thinking it's a decent film that had its moments in the 1980s to hailing it as a masterpiece to be ranked alongside Raging Bull and Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's no surprise that people who've scorned me for daring to like the new version all read Simmons. And then we get to the main part. I've read reviews of the new version that are already calling the original film a classic, okay? And reminiscing about the acting abilities of Ralph Macchio. Oh, please. There's some serious revisionist history going on here. For most of the original film, Daniel LaRusso is far from a likable character. If it's impossible for you to get it out of your head that the original, though entertaining, is, quote, not a classic that dare not be touched, then please just change the title of your new film. Okay. So that's the first one. Mm-hmm. So how does that hit you?
I need the fire hose for the hottest of takes, because so first off, I have very strong opinions about this, and I'm curious what the listeners and the viewers will be thinking. First off, this movie doesn't need Bill Simmons to call it a classic. I'm a fan of Bill Simmons. I am a fan of Bill Simmons, but Bill Simmons did not rescue this movie from the depths of whatever it was. No, this movie was huge. It's not like Johnny Mnemonic or something it didn't do well. This movie was fourth in the box office that year. It's 1984. It had some heavy hitters that it was going against. So to sit there and for this article to go claim that Bill Simmons single-handedly brought it back, come on. I mean, just come on. And then the fact that I think they said something about towards the end there where it's oh, call it something else. I don't think it needed to be remade personally. I don't think that it needed to be remade. But I think to sit here and say that it wasn't a classic and it didn't, it had cultural impact for years. I mean, wax on, wax off. Everybody knows what that means, whether you've seen this movie or not. There's lots of things throughout the movie. Sweep the leg, quotes, just if you saw a picture of Miyagi, you would know who he was. People called Pat Morita Mr. Miyagi because it was so iconic. So
the crane kick.
Exactly. This movie does not need Bill Simmons to be its champion. Other movies might, and like I said, I'm a fan of Bill Simmons, but come on, no, sorry.
Right.
Over.
I was such a fan of this movie well before I even knew who Bill Simmons was. So
exactly. I mean, this movie was before Bill Simmons, and I don't think that there was ever a lull period where this movie wasn't popular. 1984, all through the 80s, all through the 90s, all through the 2000s. This is how pop culturally relevant this was. If anyone remembers a show back on ABC back in the day called Boy Meets World, Pat Morita guest starred as a chef at Chubby's Diner, and there was a callback to Karate Kid. You know what I mean? That's how pop culturally relevant this is.
Now, I'm wondering, kind of implied with what this critic was saying, though, I think, is that it was a pretty good kids movie. And that because it's it was for families and kids, it's not a classic. It's something that kids liked. And, maybe that's why it's so popular now, because everyone liked it as kids. It's nostalgia, but it's not really a classic. Do you have thoughts on that?
It's fair, but and I think you could look at it in two different ways. So it definitely, and I see some comments here too, where folks are saying that the movie itself, and this was, martial arts type movies that got a lot of people into martial arts. So from a younger generational type stuff, younger kids, I was born in 84, so I didn't see it when it came out, but I saw it, within, X amount of years, but it did get people into martial arts. And I think it was that, but I think you also had adults where look at this movie versus a movie like Three Ninjas. Three Ninjas is a kid's movie. That's comedic and kind of jokey, and the big bad guy in there, Hugo Snyder, is kind of a joke. But this movie is kind of serious. It doesn't there may be some funny moments, but I don't think that it was intended to be a kid's movie, put it that way. So that's why I would call this more of a classic, and maybe Three Ninjas a cult classic, because that's a movie I saw as a kid. But I would never say that that's a good movie. Karate Kid is a very good film. It's a film. I would call it a film, not a movie.
Yes, indeed. And Daniel says, I don't think you can call it not a classic when there's been a reboot and reference to it in many popular shows like Family Guy or How I Met Your Mother.
Yes.
And then Drew is just talking about a bunch of other references too. So, I mean, that's kind of part of it too. It seems like it sticks around.
Yeah. It's permeated pop culture, and it's, we talked about, and Daniel mentioned the spinoffs and stuff. If you're good enough to get a spinoff and even a reboot, I guess. Like reboot's one thing, but like spin-off like the Cobra Kai series, that wouldn't exist if this movie wasn't a classic. It wouldn't exist
Right.
because people would be like, "What the heck is that?" You know, they wouldn't have any connection to it. And I know that it's very popular right now to reboot and to call back to certain things, but you know, this movie is really good, right? Like, I give another example. We talked about this, I think, maybe on one of your old KenCast, but like Saved by the Bell
Yeah.
TV show, right? Is it a classic or a cult classic? Probably cult classic because they rebooted that and it didn't stick very long. Like Cobra Kai's done a really good job. And I think like
Right.
when you start looking at the way these things are connected, it starts to paint the picture of how important this movie is in the cultural zeitgeist or whatever you would whatever one would say, right?
Right.
I have a lot of strong feelings about this. I'll try to keep it cool.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think Bert Virtue would agree with you. There's no question whatsoever that
Yeah.
Karate Kid is an all-time classic with Oscar nominations and an elite level pop culture legacy. You're right, because Pat Morita was nominated for an Academy Award. So I
Mhm.
mean, that's boosting it to not just a kids movie.
Yeah.
That's much
It's a
higher.
very well-made movie and film. It's not like we joked about Three Ninjas, like,
Right.
they're kind of the same, but not really at all, if you think
Right.
about it.
And then Jay Sedon says, I bet you these critics are the same people who say that Back to the Future isn't a classic.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting point because, you know, is Back to the Future a classic too? A lot of people will whip out the term cult classic. So not classic like Wizard of Oz or Casablanca or Godfather, but
Yeah.
you know, it's a cult classic.
Sure.
And so we've got another review here that talks about whether this is potentially a cult classic. This is in Slate. All right, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but this is what another critic said. There's an exchange in Karate Kid, the original 1984 film, not the remake out today. This is another review of the remake that recalls our benighted existence in the time before Wikipedia. Daniel's once again annoying his unpaid karate teacher, Mr.
Can't
Miyagi.
argue with that.
Yeah, by asking a perfectly reasonable question. What are the roots of this martial art I'm learning? Daniel wonders. Karate came from China, 16th century, called Te hand, says Miyagi. Hundreds years later, Miyagi ancestors bring to Okinawa, called karate, empty hand. When Daniel mentions that he thought it came from Buddhist temples and stuff like that, Miyagi shoots him down. You watch too much TV. Then the critic says, perhaps Miyagi should have watched more TV. Karate did come to Okinawa from China, but its lineage can indeed be traced to the Buddhist temples of the mainland and stuff like that. Devoted fans of the 1980s cult classic shouldn't expect to see a fact-checked version of this scene resurrected for the 2010 update, however. And Drew, I'm really interested in getting your thoughts on this, but one thing I have to mention is that this critic has completely missed the point.
I
Like
agree.
that was supposed to be a joke. Like
Yeah.
when Mr. Miyagi said, "Oh, you too much TV," that he was basically saying that it came down from Miyagi's ancestors, you know, and he was saying that it came from his family, and then that's when uh, Daniel said, "Oh, I thought it came from Buddhist temples," and then Miyagi's like, you're watching too much television." Like it's a joke. It's not
Yeah.
supposed to be. That's the point. Is Miyagi's kind of maybe inflating his own family history or something like
Yes.
that.
And that's like the Miyagi character. Like he's serious, but he's also sarcastic and funny. And I think like that's like good comedy there. Like it's not
Right.
outright like slapstick. It's just funny. Like it's funny, but it's serious. Like I like that.
Right, exactly. Now, Philomena says also having a dig at the acting and the characters is below the belt, as we don't want perfect characters, but relatable ones. Drew, what do you think though? This has right at the bottom, guys. I don't know if you can see it. This levels an accusation at the Karate Kid that it's a cult classic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a oh, I thought about this as you were reading this when we talk about remakes because this is in response to the 2010 remake, right?
Right.
With the Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan version of this. And
Yes.
I think it's okay to remake a cult classic, but it's not okay, or not that it's not okay, but I think there's no need to remake a classic because it's already been done and it's done well, right? It wasn't like panned at the box office. It wasn't, not popular enough. Like it doesn't need to be redone. If you want to do sequels like the Karate Kid series, or I'm sorry, the Cobra Kai series, then sure, that pays homage to the original version of it. But I think like this is not a cult classic because of a couple reasons, right? Like it was very successful at the box office. It didn't have any type of like box office challenges. It didn't flop. It was actually widely praised well by the critics, if I recall correctly. Like if you look at this right now, I believe it has an 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I know that that's not all
Right.
encompassing of everything,
Right.
but I think there was like 34 or some odd reviews that you would see. And the thing is, it also was popular at the time. So I think when you look at like a classic versus a cult classic, like a cult classic to me is something that maybe didn't like look at Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Right.
Like that's a type of movie that I think is like the poster child for cult classic. Like it's done well after the release, like years after, because people found it fun to watch at like midnight screening type stuff, and it got a huge following. And I'm not saying that's a bad movie by any means, but
Right.
when it came out, it was not successful. Whereas this movie, the original Karate Kid in 84, and you look at the movies that came out that year, like it was not going up against like small time movies. Like we're talking Ghostbusters, we're
Right.
talking like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. These are heavy hitters.
Yeah.
84, 85, like huge movie years. And I just can't call this a cult classic based on those facts. So
Well, it was great. Drew, we were talking about this and we were like, we should try to find some objective way to
yeah.
look at this. Like how can we tell if Karate Kid is a classic or a cult classic, or what is a cult classic? And you found actually this great article in the Ringer where it ranks 50 best cult movies, but it comes up with criteria
Mhm.
for what would be a cult classic. And so this is their criteria. Films that were A, not successful at the box office, B, were not widely and initially praised by critics, and C, gained popularity only after they left theaters,
Right.
whether by word of mouth, midnight screenings, or home video success. So this is
Mhm.
kind of like what you're talking about. So looking at sort of these criteria, yeah, I don't think Karate Kid fits.
No, it doesn't. And here you go. Let me give Bill Simmons a shout out here. They're the Ringer. There you go. Thanks, Bill Simmons, for saving and rescuing Karate Kid. But no, I agree with you because I mean you look at those three criteria, and I think it's a good objective way to look at this. Because I
Right.
mean, we mentioned Johnny Mnemonic or even Three Ninjas. Like Three
Right.
Ninjas was not a successful movie at the box office. It was not widely praised by the critics, and maybe it gained popularity after it left theaters, but that was by and large a kids movie. And you could call that a cult classic now because people of my generation or the people that grew up in the 80s and 90s have now looked at this movie. It's a fun movie to go back and watch. Like Heavyweights is another one that
Mhm.
is a good, fun movie that, did it do well at the time? No, that's a cult classic, in my opinion, Ben Stiller. But like Karate Kid, like everybody knows what the Karate Kid is. If you ask 10 people on the street, like, have you heard of the Karate Kid? Probably 9 out of 10 are going to say yes at minimum. But when you start asking people like, have you heard of Three Ninjas or have you heard of like Johnny Mnemonic? I bet you get like 1 out of 10 that would hear it. Like
Right.
it's just
Right.
permeated the culture, like we've said. So I love their scale that they came up with because I think it's a very objective way to rate these things.
Right. Robana brings up an interesting point, and she says, I'd say Karate Kid 3 is more of a cult classic.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, isn't it?
I would agree with that because
Yeah.
when you look at the scale that they gave, right? Maybe it wasn't as successful. It definitely was not praised by the critics. Like
Right.
even the cast still tries to distance themselves.
Yep.
And I would argue that it has definitely gained popularity after it left theaters for sure. So I
Right.
think it's a really good call.
Right. And then so Adam is bro, the Karate Kid 3 was the worst Karate Kid movie ever. What do you
Disagree.
mean it's more classic? And I think this is the key point, right? It's like people use the term cult classic versus classic. And it's kind of confusing. And so I think what we're saying is Karate Kid 3 is a cult classic.
Yes.
So like
agreed.
it wasn't well received. It didn't make much
Yes.
money, but it's gained a lot of popularity over the years. And
Mhm.
I think we can see that now. Look in the Cobra Kai series, how much of Karate Kid 3 is in there, and it's
Yeah.
super popular now.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like I don't think anyone's arguing that it's more classic. It's definitely not, right?
Right.
I think the truth is that it has classic moments and maybe classic characters, but the movie itself is definitely what I would consider a cult classic versus a classic. And it's got a very devout group of folks that like it, including myself included, right? I'm a huge fan of that movie, but I know it's not
Right.
it's not as good critically as the first for sure. So I
Right.
agree with Adam on that.
So what do you say? Do you think we can use these 3 criteria to help define what a classic would be?
Yeah, I think we could. I think we definitely could. It's almost like the opposite of this, right? We should talk. Let's talk through it because I agree with you.
Right. Right. Okay, so the opposite. So that would be that the movie was successful at the box office,
Hmm.
and we know the Karate Kid 3 was, right? Gosh, I'll get back to that because I think I've got some things to pull up later. All right, so we know it was successful at the box office. It grossed a lot of money.
Yeah.
The second one, we would say a classic, was widely and initially praised by critics, and it
Hmm.
was. It
Yes.
got great reviews. It got an Academy Award nomination for Pat Morita. Like, it was praised. Okay, so that's 2. And then maybe the third one gained popularity only after it left theaters by word of mouth. So in this one, it'd be more like, it didn't only gain popularity later,
Right.
but maybe later on it continued to be popular and maybe continued to have like a cultural impact.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if you look at the first Karate Kid, like it got even more popular
Right.
if you would argue that, but there was no lack of popularity when it came out. Like I think it was a cultural phenomenon, when you think about
Right.
it. It wasn't like, oh, did you guys hear about this little movie called Karate Kid? It's like, what, you haven't seen Karate Kid? Like when you talk to somebody and you say, "Hey, you haven't seen Karate Kid?" Like a classic to me is a movie like, "What? You haven't seen that?" Like
Right.
that's the kind of movie I would almost call a classic there.
Right, exactly. Now, let me bring this up. I'm going to bring up a screen here that shows. I think I had the. Oh yeah, here we go. IMDb
Yep.
domestic box office for 1984, so everyone can see. So look at this year. You've got
Mhm.
Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Gremlins, and the Karate Kid is 4th.
Yeah.
Like it was the 4th highest grossing movie of 1984 in a year that they released Ghostbusters.
Exactly. I mean, this is no slouching list here. Like this is a huge, huge list of I mean, 84 is one of the best movie years of all time, in my opinion. I'm a sucker for that, but
Right.
you can't argue against it hardly.
Yes, yes. Now, okay, so let's talk about this a bit. So Daniel asks, could you say that all Rocky movies are classics? So
That's a
let's
tough
talk
one.
about these criteria we came up with. So what would we say? Like the first one probably is.
The first one's definitely, I think, a classic based on the fact. I mean, I guess I'd have to look at the numbers to be true to our scale here,
Right.
but I think that everybody knows about Rocky. Like it's quotable. It's the song, the music,
Yeah.
just it's permeated that pop culture. Like you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't know about Rocky.
Right.
When you think about even just in the statue of Rocky in Philadelphia, right? It's got its own
Right.
statue, right? It's
Yes.
I think it's a classic. When you start talking about the later ones, maybe people trailed off, but most people have seen the first one. I would
Right.
I would argue.
Right. So the first one, it's had that lasting cultural impact. It was very successful when it came out, so it made a
Yep.
lot of money. So that's another of the 3 criteria. And the third one is that it was received well by critics, and
Yeah.
it won Best Picture of that year. So
Yep.
I think you could say the first one was a classic. I think the difference might be the later Rockies. They might have made a lot of money,
Mhm.
but maybe those elements didn't have as much cultural impact in those movies, and maybe they didn't get like the unanimous amazing reviews that the first one did. But
Yeah.
maybe there are that did. I don't know.
It's when you I'm looking this up like as we're talking. So Rocky 2, just from a critic standpoint, right? And I'll just
Right.
spit this out. 7.3 on IMDb, 72 on Rotten Tomatoes. Pretty good, right? It's a sequel, and I think that's
Right.
a good movie. When you start looking at Rocky 3, you're getting a little bit lower critically. I don't have the box office dollars in front of me, but you've got 67 on Rotten Tomatoes, 57 on Metacritic. Then you got Rocky 4, and it starts to trail off like
Right.
37. And I'm not using Rotten Tomatoes as like the end all be all, but just when we
Right.
start talking about critics, like you can start to see what people thought of it. I
Right.
think fans love them all for the most part, right?
Right.
If you're a
Right.
true fan, but I think they start to become more cult classic the further out you go from the original.
Right. So maybe it's like that idea that it has to be sort of almost widely
Yeah.
praised. And so maybe that's where the sequels kind of like Stuart Young says Rocky 4 seems to be the favorite.
Yeah.
Rocky 4, I don't know if it's quite a cult classic, but it might be leaning towards that in that the critics weren't on board with that. I think that's like more of a fan favorite that's sort of endured.
Definitely a fan favorite. I mean, you've Dolph Lundgren in that movie. It's very that's iconic when you
Mhm.
I'm kind of going against myself here, but culturally, it's maybe even more well known than the first one when you think about it,
Right,
just because of what happens in the movie. But, maybe it doesn't fit all of the criteria, but it's a very good movie in my opinion, even though
right.
the critics might not have loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so since we're talking about the Rocky sequels, what do we think of the Karate Kid sequels? Do they qualify, or are they just kind of there? Like we've mentioned the Karate Kid 3 a little bit, but let's go to Karate Kid 2.
Mhm.
Do you
Let's bring
what
this up. I gotta bring this up because I need to
r-
look at the
right.
stats.
Right. So we're looking for like critics, if it's widely loved. We're looking for if it made a lot of money, and then also if it's had a lasting cultural impact. And we're
Yeah.
talking about just the second movie. Oh, the Karate Kid Part 2.
I think when you look at it now, I'm a super fan of the series, so I have to be
Yep.
objective about this. It's gonna be very difficult, especially when
Yep.
we start talking about number 3, but for number
Yeah.
2, I'll be as objective as possible. Box office wise, it did 130 million. I don't know exactly where it is in 86 of the year 86, but it has a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think that you know, the audience score is interesting on this one too, because it's a 51%, which is
Yes.
kind of interesting, and that's over 100,000 reviews. Uh, I always thought that people found the second one better because it's sort of like a Terminator 2 scenario where it's
Right.
like it's a different setting, it's different setup. The first is 100% a classic. The second one, I think, starts to go into cult classic territory because
Right.
most people don't know what happens in that movie if you pull them off the street, right? You're
Right.
getting into fans of the series now before you start talking about it. So, from a box office standpoint, the critics not as high on it as the first
Right.
one. Um,
And
yeah,
I just looked this up. Karate Kid 3 was the third highest grossing movie of 1986, behind
yeah.
Top Gun and
There you
Crocodile
go.
Dundee.
So it did well box
Mhm.
office wise. Critically, maybe not so much. Uh, and I would argue that it has gotten more popular in the years since it's come out. People go back and appreciate it. They've grown up and maybe went back to it. They didn't catch it when it came out. I liked it growing up, so I'm kind of biased on this one. I
Right.
think it toes the line of classic and cult classic, but I think it shades more towards cult classic. I don't know if you disagree.
Yeah. I think I tend to agree with you on that. Like, and I don't know if it's kind of in that middle zone where maybe you can't even put classic on. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Like maybe it was too popular. Maybe it was too successful in its
Yes.
initial run to be considered even a cult classic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those weird, but it would be more, I think, on the cult classic side of things. Like, I just don't think it had that unanimous praise. And I don't think people, if you started quoting moments from Karate Kid 2, I don't know if many people would know that you're talking about that movie.
I don't think they would, and if you show them a picture of, like, Chosen, and you
Right.
show them a picture of Johnny Lawrence, I
Yeah.
think people are gonna know, "Oh, that's William Zabka," versus, like, the character of Chosen, like,
Right.
us fans know what it is, but maybe the average, moviegoer would not know that, especially people now. Like, if you ask people now, have they heard of the Karate Kid for the first one, they'll probably know like, scenes and things,
Right.
but outside like the ice breaking scene, maybe you don't know too much about Karate Kid 2. It's an interesting take though. I don't know. I think it's like neither to your point. It's
Right.
almost in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. Just maybe like or popular movie. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
kind of in the middle. So yeah, maybe it's neither. Maybe you can't really call it a classic or a
Yeah.
cult classic.
It's still a great movie. It's
Right.
amazing.
Now, and Robana says, Karate Kid 2 was meh for me. I don't remember it as well as the third one. Jay Sedan says Karate Kid 2 is my favorite. I enjoy movies where characters are in a different environment. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Then Aaron says Karate Kid 2 is the best, but I also love 3 thanks to Terry Silver. You're supposed to hate Terry, but you love him, at least for me. In terms of order, 2 should have been 3 and the opposite. So kind of switching those. But moving on to Karate Kid 3, though, I think Karate Kid 3 might fit cult classic.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about Karate Kid 3 on this channel anymore. I love it too
Why?
much. I love it too much. No,
Oh,
I agree with you. I think it probably does fit the cult classic just because of what it is. And I promise I won't mention Terry Silver more than a few more times now because I think I've hit my limit.
Drew, you're in a very safe channel right now. You can talk about Terry as much as you want.
I think that it does fit probably the cult classic territory because when you look at this one, 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, and again, that's only 33 reviews. I don't know the sphere of 1989 and where it fit within that. Do you have the financials handy on this one? I don't.
I think it made actually let me pull up
USA says 36 on Rotten Tomatoes, but probably on IMDb it'll give you the worldwide. Thank you, Robana. I will definitely continue to talk about Karate Kid 3.
Yes.
I have an obsession with Terry Silver, as you all know, so it's hard not to mention him at least 10 times on this show. But it's a safe space, like Ken said.
Yeah, Karate Kid 3 Part 3 made about $39 million and was the 33 on the list of 1989.
What was the budget for that? Do you have that handy?
I think it was about 10 to 11 million dollars.
Okay, so it did. I mean, guess you could consider it a flop for what they might have expected, but it still made its money back. Now I don't know about the marketing and all that other stuff, but it didn't do anywhere near like 90 million that 84 had, right? 5 years later.
It's like it was successful enough to have a fourth movie, the next Karate Kid, even though they kind of went in a new direction. So there's a little juice left, but yeah, it didn't. It was kind of let's see, it was between the movie The War of the Roses and The Burbs.
Okay, The Burbs. I love that movie.
That's that would be a cult classic. Yeah. So it's like it's in that realm where it's like it was all right, but it didn't really make that much money.
I think the character of Terry, here I go, right? I think the character of Terry Silver.
It's okay, Daniel.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
he really is, Daniel. I can't argue that. And I think the character of Terry Silver is what makes this movie a cult classic because you have so many people like, back in 2015, we were talking about this movie and not a lot of people like knew. I think Cobra Kai is turning it maybe into more of a classic.
Yeah.
You could argue. But I think that the character of Terry Silver turned it into a cult classic because there was like people watching like, oh man, you got to see, like, if you're a fan of these eccentric villains, you got to go check out Karate Kid 3. Oh, you've never seen that movie? Oh, go check it out. And then someone might see it and say, oh, this is pretty good. And they might have some fun watching it because of Thomas Ian Griffith's performance and just sort of the whole like concept of Karate Kid 3. Toxic waste magnet quits his job or goes on a leave of absence to go terrorize a teenager. Like that's like the typical type of cult classic kind of movie that would exist. So I think it fits more in the cult classic territory, even though I want it to be a classic. It's classic to me, put it that way.
Right. Exactly. But it does. It's like you love it. I really enjoy it. There was an article, I don't have it here today, but like Today actually wrote this article about saying how Karate Kid 3 is actually the best of the original Karate Kid movies. So it's like you do have publications that profess their affection for Karate Kid 3. Yeah. So yes, I think I would say it is. I think it might be a cult classic now.
Yeah.
Thanks to Cobra Kai, I think people are discovering it and appreciating it. And I think Sony has been very slow to recognize as a cult classic. They're not giving us really any special features about Karate Kid 3. So you have to listen to say our content to get information on Karate Kid 3
and your interview with Sensei Ford, because you get some behind the scenes stuff, so go check it out.
Definitely, if you like Karate Kid 3, guys, listen to that interview. Lots of new stuff that I didn't know about Karate Kid 3. Elizabeth says Karate Kid 3 is still my favorite. Terry's my favorite villain. I can listen to you talk about him for hours. So Drew, you go right on ahead.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
You talk about Terry. I love Terry. And Rabana says a lot of younger people are checking it out thanks to Terry Silver.
Yeah.
And
they
then
can appreciate him.
Absolutely. And Daniel segues us into the fourth movie. Yeah. How about the next Karate Kid?
Oh man.
So this is interesting. Drew's going to look up the numbers. I know for a fact that it did not do well. That came out in 1994. It didn't do well at the box office.
It has a 7 on Rotten Tomatoes for what it's worth, which is not
7 out of
great.
100.
7%, and the audience score is a 24. So when you look at this, it's got a 3.8 average rating out of 10. Is what they would say. Two fresh reviews, 26 rotten, and that's not all encompassing. Maybe Metacritic would be better,
Right.
but IMDb scores 4.5 when you think about the audience. Although it does have an award listed. What is this? Oh, never mind. So it won an award. It won a Stinker Award for the sequel that nobody was clamoring for.
Yeah, that's okay. So basically, no one liked it when it came out. Okay, I know it doesn't have its fans. I pulled up on IMDb. Next Karate Kid was ranked 128th in terms of box office in 1994.
Yeah.
So right between Cool Runnings and Serial Mom. So
Cool Runnings, cult classic. Love that movie.
that's a few rankings below White Fang 2, Myth of the White Wolf.
Oh man.
Yeah, which I saw in theaters, I'll admit. But so it looks like it could start to fulfill the criteria of cult classic if it's better appreciated, like if it's grown in appreciation now. I don't know. Even as a Karate Kid fan, I'm not sure. Like I see fans here and there, but I haven't seen like a general improvement in appreciation of the next Karate Kid.
It's an interesting time. In 94, it's just like a weird year for this type of movie because I don't know, maybe it's gonna sound bad, but it's like an 80s like series that sort of starts to bleed into the 90s, and the 90s started doing stuff like Speed and these different like action movies. And I think you had Hilary Swank, who's a fantastic actress. You know, when you start looking at and Pat Morita's back, so it's not like they had random people in it or anything. I guess maybe people get a little upset when you don't have all the original characters, and the Karate Kid series to me has always been about the relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. And I think getting to see him maybe tutor a new student is not going to be for everybody. You know, and maybe people think, okay, I'm not really into that. I mean, me personally, I think I've only seen it once or maybe twice. Like I've just never really been as interested. And I like Michael Ironside too. Like I think he's awesome. He's a great actor. You know, so it's an interesting thing. Like it has good star power. It came out at a weird time, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And Aaron likes it because of those two. And then Ravana says Morita and Ironside saved that movie. A lot of people are most likely checking out because of Hilary Swank, who became a huge movie star, Academy Award-winning actress. So that was her first movie. So people are checking out because of that. I would say that, and I don't know if you agree with me, Drew, and everyone in the comments, Next Karate Kid, maybe not quite, it's not quite a cult classic, but it could be. I think if there starts to be more appreciation and more people checking it out, I think it could be, it's primed to be a cult classic. Would you say?
I agree with you. I do, because I think especially if there's some way to get Julie Pierce into the Cobra Kai series in some fashion, or Colonel Dugan, some connection back to maybe the Dugan Silver Kreese situation potentially.
I've got a video on that.
There you go. Yes, you do. And I think if you could find a way to connect them, I think maybe it would be primed for it. But I also am curious, do you think it didn't do as well when you look at the way that the movies came out? It was what, 84, 86, and then 89. And then you have from 89 to 94, which is such a big gap between them. I wonder if that also didn't help, because maybe the hype started to die down a bit. If it had come out maybe 2 years later, maybe it would have done better as well instead. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I'm curious.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it could have done better if it came out sooner. That would have been in people's heads, you know, because the home video releases were staggered a lot more back then. Like you'd have the home video of Karate Kid 3 coming out 6 months to a year after the movie. So that would have been fresh in people's minds. I remember back at the time, I was watching the local news and they were announcing a new or they were saying, guess what? You know, they were talking about the next Karate Kid, but they said, guess what? He's back. There's going to be another Karate Kid movie. But that was wrong. It wasn't He's Back. It's, you know, She's Back. You know, it's the next Karate Kid. And so I'm wondering if there was some negotiation or talking about bringing Daniel back for a fourth one. That's a question I have honestly never seen asked.
It's a good one.
And that might have been kind of like, it's a last minute, oh, well, we're going to go with this one where it's a new character.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe that's too much new, maybe too much time and too many new characters. Maybe if there
Right.
were, maybe if Julie was actually more connected with, maybe if she was related to like one of the Cobras, or, you know, related to some of those original characters. Like what if she
Yeah.
was Johnny's sister or something like that, you
Sure.
know?
I think it's interesting too, like, it's hard to do a 4th movie in a series, it really is. I mean, trilogy exists for a reason, like, when you add the 4th, like, look at
Right.
The Matrix, right, recently came out, it's been a lot of years between them. I didn't love it as much, it was I'm glad we got it, I guess, but did
Right.
we need it? I don't know. When you think about a trilogy, there's sort of like a beginning, middle, and an end. When you add a 4th, it's like, okay, where is this going now? Like, I think that, the end of Karate Kid 3 was a nice ending, and I think,
Right.
I'm glad we got Cobra Kai as a series because of that, but it's just I don't know, it's really hard to make a 4th, I think, and do well. Like, unless it's like a horror franchise or something, which just kind of like copy and paste, which is okay because it's what people want, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, especially when it's kind of like, you know, it's a formula. It's like an
Yeah,
underdog formula.
yeah,
And I guess Rocky did it, but even then it's sort of like
it's hard.
it's hard. And you know, you get to Rocky 4 and there's a lot to love about it and it was super popular. Then you got to Rocky
Yeah,
5 and maybe audiences were like, well, how many times is Rocky going to be the underdog? And then it
yeah,
needed a break, you know, for a long time in order to bring him back. And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
you're right. It's tough.
It depends on the genre, right? Like, and yeah, Peter, I agree with you. Am I Rogue Nation? Like, that's an awesome movie, and it's got Tom
Ooh,
Cruise, right? Like,
yep.
Tom Cruise is awesome as an actor, and that's a fantastic movie. But like action genre, I think they can kind of keep making them, unless it's
Hmm.
maybe Terminator, because then it gets too convoluted. I still like those, but Mission
Right.
Impossible is like one of the few franchises that like I think they get better every time they come out. Like
Yep.
the new one, I'm excited for it. Like Tom
Yes.
Cruise doesn't mess around. Top Gun, the new one I've heard is fantastic.
It is, yeah. I love the new Top Gun, and actually, that's another example I think of a legacy sequel done really well.
Yeah.
Everyone who loved the first one is going to love the second one, and that's rare. And Peter from Cobra Kai Companion, thanks for suggesting Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible, I think, has become sort of Tom Cruise's Bond series,
Yeah.
and that's a series that has managed to go through like so many sequels and um, yeah, maybe it's because it's an action adventure. It's not necessarily the main
Mhm.
character has to be an underdog every
Yeah.
single time.
Yeah, and they have new peril that they're in, and
Mhm.
this might be a really controversial take, but I actually like Mission Impossible better than the Bond series. I know that's very hot take, but I find them all really enjoyable, and I like Bond too, like
Yeah,
especially the Daniel Craig years. But
right,
I love Rogue Nation's awesome, great movie.
right, right. Um, so and talking about classic versus cult classic, these Mission Impossible movies hugely popular, well loved, but probably neither. They're probably considered
Yeah.
neither a classic nor a cult classic.
Maybe the first one you could argue is a classic, maybe, but when you start talking, like, I don't know if enough time has passed, honestly, like, I
Right.
know those were what, late I forgot when the first one came out, it's like 97 or something, I'm probably messing that up, but,
Hmm.
uh, you also, I think with a classic, you need enough time to pass between 2, like, which we didn't really talk too much, like, it
Yes.
can't be maybe you'd have an instant classic, I guess, if you make something that's just so good, like, when The Matrix came out, you could tell,
Right.
like, "Okay, this is gonna be an instant classic."
Right.
But I don't know if enough time has passed for some of these to be classic.
You know, actually, that's a really great point, because we actually can get into this a bit. We're talking about the idea of cultural impact, and I
Mhm.
think that's what you're talking about. Is like,
Yeah.
has there been enough time to be like a lasting cultural impact? And I have an article we can kind of look at. Um, about, you know, what movies would create a, or at least from the 80s, had the greatest cultural impact.
Yeah.
So, okay, this this article talks about movies from the 80s, and it actually brings up Karate Kid and Cobra Kai like multiple times,
Yeah.
but it doesn't include it on its list of like top 8, which is weird. It brings up uh, Terminator, Bill and Ted, Gremlins, Batman, but it doesn't include it on this list. So let's talk about what they say has high cultural impact from the
Sure.
80s, and then see if Karate Kid has that. Dirty Dancing. Now, this movie, I know like every girl I know, my sisters, my friends, my wife, you know, every girl knows Dirty Dancing. Like, I
Mhm.
think this movie had a ton of impact. You know, don't put baby in the corner, like all that kind of stuff. As a guy, I'm not as familiar with it, so that's something to think about too. Like,
Yeah.
we can say we recognize certain movies, you know, but maybe that's just guys. Like, maybe girls don't care. I don't know. What do you think?
I would say that because of Swayze, it's certainly culturally relevant. Like I became a fan of Patrick Swayze later in life after I saw
Yes.
Roadhouse growing up. Like Roadhouse is one of my favorite movies, and that's man, I don't even know if that's a cult classic or a classic. I really don't know, but I think Swayze, it's just an awesome movie. If you haven't
Right.
watched it, go watch it. But Dirty Dancing is interesting, and I agree with your point. Like I never really watched this all the way
Right.
through. I've seen a lot of things. I know it's iconic in cultural like impact, like
Right.
the song, like they mentioned, I've had the time of my life. Just the scenes of him dancing with her.
Right.
Um, I do think it's classic, but is it? I don't know. Swayze's probably he's a very like nuclear level like movie star, so maybe it
Right.
makes it a classic because of him.
Right. And probably, like, would you think it's fair to say this movie could have about the same cultural impact maybe as Karate Kid? Like,
I
it's
think
up
so.
there.
I
Yeah.
think so. It's up there. I would argue that it is.
Okay. So that's up there. Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. I mean, Star
Okay.
Wars.
Yeah, it's Star Wars. So it's tough not to for this movie not to have cultural impact. Even people who don't like Star Wars know, Luke, I am your father,
Yep.
right?
It's so quotable.
Right. Okay. So let's keep going. Big. You guys did a whole episode on Big just lately on the Last Row podcast.
I'm wondering if they pulled my screenshot there, 'cause it looks like the exact picture that I took, but yeah, no, we just recently did this movie. I think it was like episode 105 or something.
Right.
So go check it out, thelastropodcast.com. But yeah, I mean, I love Big, and it's not like the first or last movie to do the body swap kind of thing, right? There's
Right.
Freaky Friday, other things like that, but I would argue that Karate Kid had more of a cultural impact than Big, personally, just because of like what it is. Like, there's no sequel. I mean, I don't know how you make a sequel to Big, but
Right.
it's kind of a movie of its time. Now, I love this movie. It's one of my favorites growing up,
Right.
but Tom Hanks is a superstar, but I think Karate Kid's more culturally relevant personally
Right.
with the pop culture. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and I would say even Tom Hanks's some of his other movies are much more
Yeah.
culturally impactful than Big. You know,
Yeah.
just
Great
like
movie,
yeah,
but
great movie. The Breakfast Club.
yeah.
What do we think of this compared to The Karate Kid?
It's hard to say that The Karate Kid's bigger than this just because of what it is,
Mhm.
but, although you could argue, do kids today know about The Breakfast Club? Probably not, but do they
Right.
know about The Karate Kid? I would argue that they do.
Yes.
But when you look at, like, our generation, like, people that grew up in the '80s and '90s, I think that The Breakfast Club, it's a really huge movie. I mean, just the setup of like the jock, the punk guy, the outcast, the popular girl, the nerdy guy. Like it's got so many like archetypes.
Mhm.
It spawned a whole bunch of other type of movies. I think, John Hughes, huge filmmaker from the
Right.
'80s. Like this is very culturally relevant, I think, but I could be wrong on that.
So, yeah, would you say it's like it has high cultural impact, but maybe not as much as The Karate Kid?
I think The Karate Kid is probably more popular now,
Yeah.
personally, and I think that it's probably bigger, even though maybe this more people may have seen this personally. I don't know, but not
Right.
now. I don't think you're not going to go back and say, "Oh, hey, you should go watch The Breakfast Club. You're really going to enjoy that." Like I think you gotta be in the right mindset for that.
Mhm.
Versus like the Karate Kid, you could probably enjoy that just with just about anybody. I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Ghostbusters.
Oh
I
man.
mean
I've got a poster of Vigo right over there. I know that's not the second one, but
Yes.
it's hard to argue. Like I could quote this entire movie, and I think a lot of people could. This is such a huge movie. These guys were larger than life when this movie came out. It's hard to argue that Karate Kid had a bigger impact than
Yeah.
this, personally.
Right.
As much as I hate to say it.
Yeah. I think Ghostbusters was one of those rare things. Going back to The Breakfast Club just for a second. Peter from Cobra Kai Community
Yeah.
Podcast says Ken was featured in the poster remake of Breakfast Club, and that's a joke. If you watch the first part of the Sensei Ford interview, at the end you can see we recreated the poster of the Breakfast Club. So if we're doing that, then it's got to have some kind of
That's
cultural
true.
impact. So thank you, Peter. Thank you for reminding us of that. Back to the Future.
Man, it's 1.21 gigawatts. We got to go
Yeah,
88 miles an hour. Like
yeah,
just Michael J. Fox, like Doc Brown and Christopher Lloyd. Like you just say any of those things, and I think people instantly think about Back to the Future. Like the DeLorean is such an iconic like image that
right.
if you see that, like I see DeLoreans on the road now and I think, oh my God, there's
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure Peter drove a DeLorean. Didn't you,
he did.
Peter? I think I saw pictures of that. So, I don't know if you took it to 88, but it's it's one of those things where it's hard to argue that this wasn't bigger than Karate Kid. Like I think this probably was. I don't know. It's gonna be
Right.
controversial.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's had a lasting cultural impact. I mean, they are. Did you see that they're relaunching the DeLorean?
I did, which is awesome.
The only reason they're doing that is because of the Karate. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, for Back to the Future.
Yeah.
So
If that movie didn't exist, no one would really even know what that car was. It would be like, "Oh, what is that weird car from, the '80s that didn't really have success?" It's yeah.
right, and Peter responds, "What is this Back to the Future?" So yeah, apparently he didn't take the DeLorean on a kind of joy cruise through the valley in California. So, okay, let's see. And then on this list, E.T.,
Yeah.
Extraterrestrial,
Spielberg.
Spielberg, really classic movie. Lots of cultural impact. Do you sense that it's getting to the point now where maybe it's starting to have a little less cultural impact? Like
Yeah.
we all know it so well, but I'm wondering if are kids watching this now?
This is a movie that I don't think kids are watching now, whereas if you
Okay.
go back and you watch, I mean, I could be completely dead wrong on that, but when you
Yeah.
go back and watch a movie like Karate Kid, I think you're gonna get kids watching this more. Like E.T. is sort of like an adult movie that was like hidden as a kids movie, honestly. Like
Right.
when I watched this as a kid, I remember it freaking me out a bit because it's
Yes.
like, there's an alien in your closet. Like
Right.
I know he's a nice alien and I know that he likes Reese's Pieces, but
Yes.
at the same time, it's kind of creepy looking. And I remember having nightmares of the scene when they were like giving him the defibrillator and all that
Yes.
stuff, or whatever it was when they had him in the plastic,
Yep.
and the agents, like whatever the Men in Black, kind of took him away.
Yeah.
That freaked me out as a kid, and I think
Yeah.
you don't really have those moments. Maybe Karate Kid's violent, but at the same time, it's like I don't know if I'm gonna go back and say to my daughter like, "Hey, you got to watch ET." Like I know that I would with Karate Kid. I could be wrong on that too, but
Yeah.
my personal opinion.
Well, Terry brings up an interesting point. She says, I think what helped Ghostbusters and Back to the Future, and
Yeah.
maybe E.T., is the fantasy and paranormal theme on it. Brings more people to watch. Karate Kid was more of a simple plot. It's the actors who made it great.
That's a
Do you,
great point.
do you think there is something about the supernatural, something that, or fantasy elements that make it wider, appeal to a wider audience?
It's more of a spectacle when you consider that, like to Terry's point, like it had the special effects, it had this concept of going back in time, like that's
Mm.
really cool. And like even Ghostbusters, like when they were doing the special effects that they did with that, it was kind of unseen. And the way that I mean, if you follow the making of Ghostbusters and you see how that movie came together, you got to give a lot of respect to Reitman and all of those guys that were involved in that. That
Yeah.
movie came together. It's a wonder how it came together as successfully as it did with some of the challenges that they faced. So
Hmm.
if you haven't read about it, I go check it out. But I agree with Terry in that regard, in that it's more of a spectacle, and I think it brings a lot of people to it. Whereas Karate Kid is very plot driven, very like kind of simple plot, but the actors made it what it was. I think, to your point.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. I totally agree. And then they say like the number one would be Raiders of the Lost Ark
Yeah,
and cultural impact. Yeah, obviously this is a bona fide classic, and
yeah,
everyone knows about Indiana Jones. There are just so many elements that are purely Indiana Jones, just very distinctive, from the whip to,
yeah.
the rolling stone. And I don't know what. So maybe you would say probably Raiders is bigger also than Karate Kid.
It definitely is, I think, just because of, I mean, you got the Spielberg aspect of it. Like you put that hat on and the whip, and I think people know what that is. Maybe you could argue Daniel's the headband that Daniel wears. Like if you saw the pattern of that, you might know what it is.
Right.
But Raiders of the Lost Ark was such a huge movie, and it was very influential. And just Harrison Ford was a superstar too.
Hmm.
Not to say that that's why it was good. It's good for a lot of other reasons, but that movie, it's hard to argue that Karate Kid's bigger than this. I think you're going to be hard pressed to find someone that doesn't enjoy Raiders of the Lost Ark more
Right.
so than Karate Kid.
Right.
But it's hard because I'm a fan of Ghostbusters, and for me, I look at like Raiders and Ghostbusters as sort of like 1A and 1B. It's really hard
Hmm.
to argue otherwise for this year and just really at the time. But man, it's a tough one. I just think Ghostbusters would be number one to me, but I think Raiders is definitely more of a classic than Karate Kid.
Yeah. Now, so looking at all of these, and Dylan Gaming says, I love KenCast. I watch every episode. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, guys.
Thank
And if
you.
you're watching this right now, either live or on replay, go ahead and hit subscribe. After you hit subscribe, I promise you'll feel really good.
It's very easy. Just hit the button. It's just a
Yeah,
little click.
just hit the button. And Peter has a kind of controversial Crusade is greater than Raiders. That's a lot of people do feel that
Yeah.
way. And Robana says Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
So
Underrated.
yeah,
Temple of Doom is underrated.
I think it's underrated as well. But so subscribing's free. That's right. And it's also free on the Last Row podcast.
Yes.
You guys do have a YouTube channel.
We
Cobra
do.
Kai Companion has a YouTube channel. So go ahead and hit these channels up. Drew, we just kind of analyzed this list of cultural impact from the 80s movies. They did not include Karate Kid on the list, but it seems like they really should have. Like, it seemed like Karate Kid was maybe a little more impactful than some of those movies.
It definitely was, and to not put that on the list to me is like a glaring omission. Like, and the fact that like, how can you talk about the 80s and not talk about Karate Kid? Like,
Right.
it just doesn't compute. Like, I don't
Right.
know. There's so many memes and cultural like items and pop culture, like Wax On, Wax Off, Sweep the Leg,
Right.
like those two alone, Crane Kick, like
Right.
that has to be on that list. It has to be.
And I'm going to say this, like, all respect to the author of that list. I think something funny is going on
Yeah.
when they do that list. And in the intro, they mention Terminator, Karate Kid, Batman, Bill and Ted, like, and they don't put them on the list because the original 89 Batman was a phenomenon, and it still lasts to today, that Batman logo. And I mean,
you wouldn't have the superhero movies without that movie. Like, that's how important to movie cultural history that Tim Burton movie was. Now, you could argue it's not like the phenomenal like indication of who Batman is as a character. That's fine, right?
Right.
But that movie was so influential in that entire genre, and that's why it exists today, you could argue.
Right. And I would say that Batman was so impactful. I don't know if anyone remembers that time when it came out, but the context for superhero movies were basically the Batman series of the 60s had a really not well performing movie version with the TV cast, and it was super campy. And then you had Christopher Reeve's Superman movie, which or his series that did well. It was still very positive. At that point, no one had any concept of a cinematic superhero movie that was dark, gritty, adult. And when it came out, it was PG-13.
Yep.
Which people, and I know, like, I was like, oh no, am I going to be able to see it? I was young. But like, that meant that this had like intensity to it. This was not geared towards kids. This was a new era. And now look at superhero movies now. They've flourished. But how many of them are gritty and dark and take themselves seriously? Like, they're not campy. Like, it's that 189 Batman movie influenced superhero movies till today.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And Tim Burton was a visionary at that time. Like, I remember, if you want to look at behind the scenes, go look at some of the behind the scenes stuff for that. Like, the studio was worried about what he was doing, and they were like, "Oh my God!" Like, he had a pitch, and I remember watching something. He had to make some like videos of like what they were trying to do and reassure Warner Brothers, like, hey, yeah, this is going to be okay. I mean, it was off the coattails of like the Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller comics and stuff like that. So that started to turn Batman towards the more gritty version of it. And people would argue it's too gritty now, but it, was very culturally relevant. And I don't know if you can see my death metal Batman there playing a guitar, but
oh wow,
I love Batman. I'm a huge fan. I mean, I've got my Superman shirt. I'm a big Batman Superman fan. So I can talk about that for hours. That's another KenCast.
Absolutely. I would love to talk about all that. Jay Sadan says that Batman soundtrack, Prince, is a masterpiece. Peter, that was his first movie theater experience. What a great one to have too.
Yeah.
So okay, so and I thought I saw actually a question earlier that I didn't get to from Bryce Productions that was basically asking if the next Karate Kid and the remake would get a 4K version. I'm sure those will come. Cobra Kai is pretty much guaranteed. People are kind of teasing that Julie Pierce might return at some point. Like, I'm sure that once that happens, they'll be doing 4K remasters of all of this. But kind of bringing everything back to our discussion of the Karate Kid, these critics that say it's not a classic, I think we can say conclusively, objectively, are wrong,
Yeah,
right?
100%. I mean, I think we've proven them wrong with various data points, and just the three that we mentioned, right? Like box office wise, it was great.
Right.
Critically, it was great, and it was not well known at the time and grew in popularity. If anything, it just became even more popular. And like a
Right.
lot of your audience has said, a lot of the awesome comments in the chat here have been like, all throughout the years, you've got spin-offs, you've got sequels, you've got, references in other
Yeah.
shows, like for 30 years here. Like
Right.
this is a classic, and it's no doubt about it, in my opinion. No doubt.
Right. And that's something to remember, I think, if you're a critic or a film lover, is that saying something's a classic is beyond your own personal opinion, because obviously Citizen Kane is a classic. Does everyone like it? No.
Right.
So it's like you might watch it and you might go, this is boring. I don't like it. Godfather, it's my wife Amber, I don't think she minds saying that. She doesn't like it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's amazing. Like, it is a classic movie.
Right.
So classic goes beyond your personal opinion on something. It's based on these data points that we talked about.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%.
Mhm. Now, when people say it's a cult classic, that's also wrong, right?
Yeah, I would agree, because I think that, when they're talking about a cult classic, that's almost like no one really liked it at the time, no one really cared, and now there's a huge following. Like, there was a huge following all throughout the time, and I think,
Mhm.
we mentioned, I threw out a whole bunch of them, but like Heavyweights, Three Ninjas, like Johnny Mnemonic, like, I don't know, Biodome, like I'm looking at the IMDb page for this. It's like
Right,
all these
yeah.
random movies that like are objectively like not good,
Right.
but you enjoy them, and I think maybe they have some following, behind the scenes here. So Karate Kid is not a cult classic. It's a very much a classic.
It's very much a classic. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we hit it out of the park, just in my own humble opinion, along with you guys. Elizabeth says it's most definitely a classic, especially with Cobra Kai's popularity. Let's see. Mohammed says Karate Kid is a classic. Man, all three parts are awesome. I love Karate Kid 2 the most. Waiting for Cobra Kai season 5.
Yeah.
Um, obviously the classic question was Daniel, the real bully. And this is something, Philomena, I think what you're referencing, can we take a second to mention how badass and awesome to read that yesterday Ralph Macchio, and I think this is about the news that he's getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I feel bad that I missed that for the news segment earlier on KenCast. But yes, you're hearing it now. He will be getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which is well deserved.
That's awesome.
He's an institution. And then Terry says, my best friend doesn't like Karate Kid. She finds it boring, but she prefers her fantasy and sci-fi only and paranormal. Tried to get her to watch, but she wasn't interested. That happens.
Yeah.
It's all like, I don't know, Drew, if you have this experience, like in your family, like I have sisters and stuff. And sometimes I try to get them to watch something and they're like, no. And I don't know, you have a brother, right?
I do. Yeah. He has the similar tastes as
That's
me.
good.
Shout out to Derek. Hey, how you doing if you're watching? but yeah, we watched, I mean, we grew up watching Karate Kid and whatnot. It's hard to find the time to watch, I guess, stuff as much these days, just, where life gets in the way. But I understand that the feeling of trying to get people to watch stuff and they're just like, not so much. They're not into it.
Exactly. And Peter from Cobra Kai Companion says people throw around the words cult classic like they do for theories about Cobra Kai.
I like that, Peter.
Which is pretty. It's fun to come up with theories of Cobra Kai. But cult classic, I think today, Drew, we've defined it. Yeah. So like there shouldn't be any throwing around terms anymore if you've seen this KenCast.
breaking ground here on the KenCast.
Exactly. And Detective Bat says an amazing thing. Karate Kid's a classic. It was the movie that got people into karate dojos. And this is something that Pat Johnson said. And you talk about cultural impact. A movie that can explode enrollment in karate across the country.
Yes.
That's cultural impact.
Yeah, it got, I mean, myself included, like it got people really interested in martial arts. And, whether you were doing, karate or tai chi or whatever, right? Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, it got people talking about this stuff. It got a lot of like younger people into it too.
Hmm.
Huge cultural impact, huge.
Yeah.
So, classic, absolutely.
Well, Drew, thank you for joining us today. I think we did it. I think we showed that it's a classic. I think there was a lot of meat in here today. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. Like now I
Yes.
know what a classic is.
Me
So
too. I had fun too. It's fun. It's fun talking about these types of movies, and I like relating them to one another because I think if you're a fan of Karate Kid, I think you're probably a fan of some of these other movies, and it's fun to look at maybe the impacts that they all had on each other during that time period, and maybe how they relate now. So it's fun, and everyone that's in the chat and everyone that's going to watch this on replay. You guys are awesome too. Thank you for all the great comments, and I love interacting with everybody, and yourself included, Ken. This is fun.
thanks. Yeah, always an honor to have you on, Drew. I love talking to you about all this stuff. And you guys have a great podcast, you and Badway, and you guys just have such deep thoughts about all these movies, such fun discussions, and it's fun to talk about this stuff. And thank you guys. Thank you everyone who's watching, who watched this on replay, watching live today. If you enjoy my stuff, if you enjoy KenCast, go ahead and hit subscribe. And then also check out Drew's Last Row podcast. Peter's been in here. Check out Cobra Kai Companion. Lots of great stuff. But so Drew, you don't want to say what you're doing next for Last Row podcast.
We'll keep it a surprise, but we have another episode coming out this upcoming Thursday.
Okay.
We do new episodes every other Thursday. So last week was our week off. Next week is our new episode. But the previous episode was Final Destination. Go check that one out if you're a fan of the 2000 thrillers. And check out our back catalog at thelastrowpodcast.com. We've done a lot of 80s, 90s movies. We've done Karate Kid 3 at one point before Cobra Kai existed, so maybe it doesn't hold up as well, but we had a lot of Terry Silver speculation at the time. But
Yes.
we love the movies of that era. So definitely, if you're a fan, go check us out if you feel if you're interested. So, and thanks in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Terry Silver episode, Drew, it definitely holds up. And based on all of our criteria today, I'd call it a classic.
It is a classic.
It is a classic episode. If you listen to one podcast episode about Terry Silver, that's it. Listen to Drew's Last Row podcast, The Ballad of Terry Silver. That's
Yeah.
the name of it. Peter, want to thank you for bringing. And if anyone has 5 minutes, go watch Bigfoot and Me, guys. If you like Bigfoot, if like Terry said likes the paranormal, or if you enjoy the concept of Bigfoot and you wondered what would it be like to find Bigfoot, what would happen? What if you wanted to see Bigfoot your whole life and you found Bigfoot? Then check out Bigfoot and Me. So that's on my channel. It's my short film. It did a festival run, and I've uploaded it to YouTube, so you can check it out. So
It's
enjoy
fantastic.
it. And yes, you can. And Dylan, thank you. Bigfoot and Me is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, and hopefully heartwarming and a little amusing. So Aaron says, what channel name do you have, Drew? I want to check it out.
Yeah, check out our website, thelastrowpodcast.com. But I think there's a link in the description on this video for our YouTube channel. We're going to start putting more content on there. We have all of our episodes out, but we're going to probably start putting some more video stuff. Maybe we'll do some live streams and have Ken and maybe Peter and some other folks on. It might be fun to do that. So hit subscribe on our YouTube channel too if you get a chance.
That's great. And then Robana asked, Drew, have you done Super Mario Brothers?
So I want to do this, Robana, so bad, but you actually cannot find this movie like legally anywhere right now. It's in this like weird rights limbo. It is on our list for sure because it is a cult classic to me. I love this movie. It's not good, but I love it. But it is definitely going to be on that list. So thank you for bringing that one up.
Absolutely. And I have an HD version of Super Mario Brothers, and the only way I could get it was through Riff Tracks. So if you guys watch Riff Tracks, which is like the Mystery Science Theater guys, they riff movies and you can download the whole movie and it has the their commentary embedded in it. And that's the only way I have it, is that it's a super funny commentary, but hopefully they'll make it more widely available pretty soon. There's Marinella, will there be a second season of Cobra Cole? Well, please. I would love that, guys. I would say in the meantime, we're exploring everything that's possible. I think everyone involved wants to do more. There's definitely a whole story idea for that. go share, like and share that, and let's get the views up on Cobra Cole. And
Yes.
I think Cobra Kai fans who haven't seen it will love it. So if you guys can share it, that's great. And then yeah, maybe we could talk about maybe some more. So
Yeah.
that would be a lot of fun. So much fun. Right, Cobra Cole episode 2. Yes, I've got there are many episodes in mind. So there's a whole story there.
Yeah. You got to check out also, just give a quick shout out to Peter. Check out Peter's podcast, Podstalgic. It's awesome. Very much the same movies that we've been talking about too. Definitely give Peter's podcast a listen. It's very good. Definitely recommend it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Peter produces some great content. He's a big presence here on KenCast. And so definitely check that out. I love the riff tracks, guys. Terry
That's
says,
cool.
you met them. That's great.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. They're so funny. They're like old buddies and just hilarious. Do you look at riff tracks?
Sometimes, yeah, not regularly, but yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. The best, if you haven't seen Riff Tracks and want to, I think you can get Pluto TV. It's like a free app. There's a Riff Tracks channel. You can just put it on and there's always something on to watch. So, Drew, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. This was super fun. And guys, I hope you had fun watching. If there's anything you want to see us talk about, let us know. Like in the comments, you could put it in the chat, but also in the comments to this video. Put it there. And if there's something that you'd like us to discuss, we'd love to do that. And do you guys take requests, Drew, for Last Row?
We do. We have a backlog. We're slowly working through it. But if you want to send us an email, thelastrowpodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave comments on our website. There's a contact form out there too. If you guys want us to do a particular movie, we're always looking for new ones. We've got our backlog right now, but we've been getting some good requests. So definitely send us a note, or even leave a comment on this video. I'll check it out after too.
Yes. Perfect. Everyone, do that if you have something you want to see. Peter says KenCast is the only thing that matters on Saturday afternoons. Thank you, Peter. Humbly, I agree. You guys are the cool people. You know where it's at in this universe, and this is what's happening right now. So, Drew, just a quick sum up. Thanks for joining us. But Karate Kid is a classic. Yep. Full classic, not a cult classic. Fully. It's a classic. Karate Kid 2 is not a classic or cult classic, though. It's
in the middle.
It's in the middle. And Karate Kid 3 is a cult classic, we can say.
Yes, but to me, it's a classic.
Yes,
it's my classic.
Yes, indeed. I think now we can say it's a cult classic.
Yeah,
I think there's enough data for it. And then
agree.
next Karate Kid, primed to maybe someday be a cult classic. Maybe.
I agree with that.
If it gets, yes. All right, guys. Thanks, Marianella. Waiting for Cobra Cole 2. Would love to do it. So, guys, thanks for joining us today. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe on this video. Share it with any friends that you might think would like this. Any Cobra Kai communities, any movie communities. Really appreciate the exposure. We're trying to grow. We're trying to get to 25,000 subscribers. Thank you guys for being on board for KenCast and the Ken Cole channel. Thank you to Drew from the Last Row podcast. Always appreciate your insights, and I learned so much when I speak with Drew. So thank you so much, Drew.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks. It's awesome. And thanks to everyone in the chat and in the audience. Thank you.
Absolutely. And everyone watching, thank you, and have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.